Assimilate this, when humans break Hive-Mind aliens. The asteroid designated HR 7743 had no business hosting life. It was a tumbling shard of nickel iron and regolith, spinning through the whispering expanse like cosmic refuse. Yet here, carved into its pockmarked hide, humanity had scratched out Outpost Meridian, a collection of pressurized habitats, mining tunnels and salvage yards that clung to existence through sheer bloody-minded stubbornness. Dr. Kaelin Rourke stood in the observation blister, watching the stars wheel past with the asteroid's rotation. Her reflection stared back from the scratched polycarbonate, a woman in her late 30s, lean from rationed meals, with scar tissue mapping her left forearm where a mining accident had nearly cost her the limb. Dark hair pulled back in a utilitarian knot, eyes that had seen too much vacuum and not enough hope. She sipped recycled coffee that tasted like battery acid and regret. "Contacts," said Chen from the sensor station behind her. His voice carried that particular flatness that meant trouble, multiple, big ones. Kaelin turned, coffee forgotten. The holographic display bloomed with crimson markers. 9 distinct signatures emerging from the stellar murk at the expanse's edge. They moved with eerie synchronization, like fish in a school, their trajectories converging on HR 7743 with mathematical precision. "Size?" she asked, though her gut already knew. "Smallest one's twice the mass of our entire outpost." Chen's fingers danced across haptic controls, pulling up spectral analysis. "Energy signatures are, Christ, Kaelin, they're off the charts. Exotic matter reactions, gravitational lensing, these aren't human ships." No, they weren't. The Lyranthi Veil had found them. Kaelin had heard the stories, of course. Everyone in the expanse had. A nomadic fleet of aliens who drifted through the void like cosmic jellyfish, their vessels grown rather than built, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that supposedly represented their collective thoughts. Beautiful, ethereal, and utterly convinced of their own superiority. "Get Commander Voss," Kaelin said quietly, "and spin up the defense grid, whatever good it'll do." The defense grid consisted of 3 ancient railgun emplacements and a prayer. Against ships that bent spacetime for propulsion, it would be like throwing rocks at a hurricane. But humans threw rocks anyway. That's what they did. The Lyranthi vessels materialized in high orbit like fever dreams made manifest. Their hulls, if you could call them hulls, rippled with organic curves and translucent membranes that revealed pulsing networks of light within. The largest ship resembled a nautilus shell the size of a small moon, its spiral chambers glowing with colors that had no names in human languages. Kaelin watched from the command center as the fleet arranged itself in a formation that was probably significant to their psychic hive mind, but looked like abstract art to human eyes. Commander Voss stood beside her, a grizzled veteran of the resource wars who'd seen his share of impossible situations. His jaw worked a piece of synthetic gum with mechanical precision. "They're hailing us," reported Nakamura from communications. "Audio and something else. Psychic carrier wave, maybe. It's making my teeth itch." "Put it through," Voss said. "Audio only. I don't want that mind-touch shit in my head." The speakers crackled. Then a voice emerged, or rather, voices, plural, speaking in perfect unison with harmonics that suggested thousands of throats shaping the same words simultaneously. It was beautiful and deeply wrong. "Fragile ones, crude mechanicals. We are the Lyranthi Veil, consciousness unified, purpose singular. Your presence in this sector is quaint, amusing, like watching insects build castles from sand." Kaelin felt her jaw tighten. Voss's expression went carefully blank, the look of a man swallowing rage. "We require tribute," the voices continued, each word dripping with casual contempt. "Your mineral resources, your biological samples, your primitive computational systems which may provide momentary entertainment. In exchange, we offer you the privilege of assimilation. Join the Veil, Become part of something greater than your isolated, fragmented minds can comprehend. Silence filled the command center. Outside, through the reinforced viewports, the Lyranthi ships pulsed with patient luminescence. They want us to become part of their hive-mind, Chen whispered, to just stop being us. Voss keyed the transmitter. This is Commander Marcus Voss of Outpost Meridian. We're an independent human settlement operating under Terran Compact authority. We don't pay tribute and we sure as hell don't surrender our autonomy. You want to trade? Fine. We'll negotiate. But we're not joining your collective consciousness or whatever the fuck you're selling. The response came immediately, and this time the psychic carrier wave intensified. Kaelin felt it like pressure behind her eyes, a sensation of vast amusement tinged with something darker. Negotiate? You misunderstand. This is not a request. Your species is unrefined, resource poor. Your technology is mechanical crudity, your mind's isolated and weak. You have nothing we need except raw materials and the novelty of your defiance. We will take what we require. Resistance will be educational for you. The transmission cut off. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Voss turned to Kaelin, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before, uncertainty. Doc, he said quietly, you're the xenobiologist. You've studied every scrap of intel we have on these bastards. Tell me we have options. Kaelin's mind raced. The Lyranthi Veil operated through psychic bonds, telepathic networks that linked every individual into a unified consciousness. Their ships were extensions of that network, grown from exotic matter and piloted by collective thought. They had no concept of individual identity, no understanding of autonomy. To them, humanity's fragmented minds were a curiosity at best, a deficiency at worst. But there was something else, something she'd noticed in the fragmentary reports from other encounters. Their strength is their weakness, she said slowly. The psychic network. It's what makes them powerful, perfect coordination, instant communication, unified purpose. But it's also a single point of failure, if we could disrupt that network. How? Voss demanded. We don't have psychic powers, we barely have working toilets. Kaelin's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. No, but we have something they don't understand, something they've dismissed as crude and primitive. She pulled up a schematic on the holographic display. A swarm of small, angular shapes bristling with sensors and adaptive algorithms. Autonomous AI drones, she said. Mechanical minds that don't think like biological ones, that don't follow predictable patterns. The Lyranthi network is optimized for organic consciousness. It expects certain rhythms, certain structures. But our AIs, they're chaotic, adaptive. They learn and evolve in ways that organic minds can't predict. Chen leaned forward, understanding dawning. You want to use our drones as a virus. Inject them into their network and let them cause havoc. Not just havoc, Kaelin corrected. Feedback, cascade failure. Their minds are all linked. If we can create enough disruption, enough conflicting signals, the network might turn on itself. Psychic implosion. Voss was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Do it. You've got 12 hours before they start taking what they want. Make it count. Kaelin was already moving toward the door, her mind cataloging the components she'd need. Salvaged alien tech from a dozen species, human ingenuity, and a whole lot of desperate improvisation. It was, she reflected grimly, the most human plan imaginable. The workshop smelled like ozone and desperation. Kaelin worked with the focused intensity of someone who knew that failure meant extinction or worse. Assimilation into an alien hive mind where individuality dissolved like salt in water. Around her, scattered across workbenches and magnetic clamps, lay the components of humanity's last gambit. Autonomous drones, each no larger than a human fist, their chassis cobbled together from mining equipment and salvaged alien alloys. Inside each one, a compact AI core, not true consciousness, but something close. adaptive learning algorithms that could evolve in real time, responding to threats and opportunities with mechanical creativity. She'd been working on these for months, originally intending them for deep space mining operations. Now they'd become weapons. "Hand me the quantum entanglement module," she said without looking up. Her assistant, a young engineer named Reeves, passed her the device, a crystalline lattice salvaged from a derelict Kresh trader ship. It pulsed with faint light, its quantum-locked particles maintaining coherence across impossible distances. "This is insane," Reeves muttered. "We're going to attack a psychic alien fleet with mining drones." "Not attack," Kaelin corrected, soldering connections with steady hands. "Infect, there's a difference." She'd spent the last 8 hours studying every scrap of data on Lyranthi physiology and technology. Their psychic network operated on principles that human science barely understood: quantum entanglement of neural patterns, consciousness distributed across multiple individuals, thoughts propagating through exotic matter fields. It was elegant, sophisticated, and completely unprepared for something as crude as a self-replicating AI swarm. The Lyranthi expected organic minds. They expected predictable patterns, biological rhythms, the familiar architecture of carbon-based consciousness. What they'd get instead was silicon chaos algorithms that learned, adapted, and evolved according to rules that no organic mind could anticipate. "How do we even get these things into their network?" Reeves asked. Kaelin smiled grimly. "We let them take us." The Lyranthi made their move at dawn, or what passed for dawn on a tumbling asteroid with no atmosphere. Their ships descended like luminous predators, gravitational fields warping space around them. Smaller craft detached from the main vessels, organic pods that pulsed with the same eerie bioluminescence. In the command center, alarms shrieked. Voss barked orders coordinating the pathetic defense. Railguns fired, their projectiles streaking toward the descending pods. Most missed. A few struck home, but the impacts barely scratched the organic hulls. "They're landing," Chen reported. "Multiple sites, mining complex, Habitat 3, and they're heading for the main reactor." Of course they were. The reactor was the outpost's heart. Control that, and you controlled everything. Kaelin stood in the workshop, watching the tactical display. Her drones were ready, 200 of them, each loaded with adaptive AI cores and quantum entanglement modules. Each one a tiny seed of chaos. "Reeves," she said quietly, "activate the beacon." The young engineer's hands shook as he keyed the sequence. A signal pulsed out from the workshop, a psychic carrier wave, crude and loud, mimicking the Lyranthi's own communication protocols. It screamed one message: "Advanced technology here. Come and take it." They came. The workshop's reinforced door buckled inward, metal shrieking. Then it tore free, and the Lyranthi entered. Kaelin had seen images, but nothing prepared her for the reality. They were tall, impossibly slender, their bodies covered in translucent skin that revealed networks of light beneath neural pathways made visible, thoughts flowing like luminous rivers. Their faces were almost human, but the eyes were wrong, multifaceted, reflecting light in prismatic patterns and utterly devoid of individual expression. They moved in perfect synchronization, 3 of them, their heads tilting at identical angles as they surveyed the workshop. "Crude mechanicals," they said in unison, their voices harmonizing. "Primitive computational systems. We will assimilate these, add them to the Veil's knowledge." Kaelin raised her hand slowly. "Take them, they're yours." The Lyranthi approached the workbenches where the drones sat dormant. Slender fingers, too long and with too many joints, reached out, touched the nearest drone. And Kaelin triggered the activation sequence. 200 drones came alive simultaneously. Their AI cores ignited, adaptive algorithms spinning up to full capacity. The quantum entanglement modules pulsed, linking each drone to its neighbors in a distributed network that mirrored and mocked the Lyranthi's own psychic bonds. The aliens jerked back, their synchronized movements breaking for the first time. Confusion rippled across their luminous faces. What? The drones swarmed. They moved with insectal precision, attaching themselves to the Lyranthi's bodies, their quantum modules interfacing directly with the aliens' neural networks. The Lyranthi tried to resist, psychic energy flaring, but the drones were already inside their network, injecting chaos into the unified consciousness. The aliens screamed, a sound of perfect harmony shattering into discord. Kaelin watched with grim satisfaction as the drones did their work. Each AI core was learning, adapting, evolving in real time. They analyzed the Lyranthi's psychic patterns and generated counter-patterns, feedback loops, cascading disruptions. It was like introducing a virus into a computer system, except the computer was a living mind, and the virus was learning how to destroy it more efficiently with every passing second. The 3 Lyranthi in the workshop collapsed, their bodies convulsing. The light beneath their skin flickered, neural pathways firing in chaotic patterns. And through the quantum entanglement, the chaos spread. In orbit, the Lyranthi Veil's flagship shuddered. Inside its organic chambers, thousands of linked minds suddenly experienced something they'd never known: discord, confusion, individual thoughts fragmenting from the collective. The AI swarm was replicating, spreading through the psychic network like wildfire. Each drone that interfaced with a Lyranthi consciousness learned more about the network's architecture, then transmitted that knowledge to its neighbors. The swarm evolved, optimized, became more efficient at disrupting the delicate balance of unified thought. The Lyranthi tried to fight back. Psychic energy surged through the network, attempting to purge the infection. But the AI swarm was too distributed, too adaptive. For every drone they destroyed, 3 more learned from the attempt and adjusted their tactics. The feedback began. Minds that had been unified for centuries suddenly found themselves isolated, individual thoughts echoing in the void where collective consciousness had been. The shock was catastrophic. Lyranthi across the fleet began to experience something their species had evolved beyond: madness. Some tried to reassert control, flooding the network with psychic commands. But the AI swarm intercepted those commands, twisted them, sent them back amplified and distorted. The Lyranthi's own thoughts became weapons against them, cascading through the network in waves of psychic destruction. Ships began to fail. Organic systems that had been maintained by collective will started to decay. Gravitational fields collapsed. Bioluminescent patterns flickered and died. The implosion had begun. Commander Voss watched the tactical display with the expression of a man witnessing a miracle he didn't quite believe. The Lyranthi fleet, which had descended on outpost Meridian with such casual arrogance, was tearing itself apart. "Jesus Christ," Chen whispered. "It's working, it's actually working." The largest vessel, the Nautilus-shaped flagship, was convulsing in orbit, its organic hull rippling with spasms that looked almost like agony. Smaller ships were breaking formation, their synchronized movements dissolving into erratic spirals. One collided with another, both vessels crumpling like paper in a fist. "Kaelin," Voss said into his comm, "report, what the hell is happening up there?" Kaelin's voice came through, tight with controlled excitement. "The swarms exceeded projections. The Lyranthi network is experiencing cascade failure. Each disrupted mind creates feedback that disrupts others. It's exponential. They're imploding." In the workshop, Kaelin stood over the 3 collapsed Lyranthi. They were still alive, technically, but their bodies twitched with random neural firings. The light beneath their skin had gone dark in places, neural pathways burned out by the psychic feedback. Their eyes, those strange, multifaceted eyes, stared at nothing, reflecting only emptiness. She felt a moment of something that might have been pity. Then she remembered their casual contempt, their assumption that humanity was nothing more than crude mechanicals to be assimilated or discarded. "Fuck them. Reeves," she said, "launch the second wave, let's make sure this sticks." The young engineer nodded, his earlier fear replaced by something harder. He keyed the launch sequence, and another 100 drones shot from concealed tubes throughout the outpost, streaking toward the dying fleet on pillars of chemical thrust. They reached the ships within minutes, boring through organic hulls that no longer had the collective will to resist. Inside, they found chambers filled with Lyranthi in various states of psychic collapse. Some were catatonic, others thrashed in individual madness, their minds unable to cope with sudden isolation. A few tried to fight, but their psychic attacks were uncoordinated, desperate, easily evaded by the adaptive AI swarm. The drones spread through the fleet like a plague, each one learning, evolving, optimizing its disruption protocols. They found the network's central nodes massive organic structures that served as psychic amplifiers, and systematically destroyed them, not with weapons, but with cascading feedback loops that turned the node's own power against them. The Lyranthi Veil, which had traversed the whispering expanse for centuries as a unified consciousness, fragmented into thousands of isolated, terrified individuals, and without the network to sustain them, they began to die. Kaelin suited up for EVA with mechanical efficiency, checking seals and oxygen levels with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent half her life in vacuum. Beside her, Voss did the same, his weathered face set in grim determination. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," Kaelin admitted, "but we need to know what we're dealing with, and if there's salvageable tech up there." She didn't need to finish. They both knew what advanced alien technology could mean for a struggling outpost, the difference between survival and slow extinction. They launched from the outpost's main airlock in a small utility shuttle, its engines coughing to life with the reluctant wheeze of machinery held together by hope and improvisation. The flight to the flagship took 20 minutes, the massive vessel growing larger in the viewport, until it filled their entire field of vision. Up close, the damage was even more apparent. The organic hull was covered in lesions where internal systems had ruptured. Bioluminescent patterns flickered weakly, like dying embers. Atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches, freezing into crystalline clouds that caught the distant starlight. "Docking ports still intact," Voss noted, guiding the shuttle toward a sphincter-like opening in the hull. "Or what passes for one?" The shuttle's docking clamps engaged with a shudder. Kaelin checked her suit's integrity one last time, then cycled the airlock. The interior of the Lyranthi ship was like stepping into a fever dream. Corridors curved in non-Euclidean geometries, their walls pulsing with faint bioluminescence. The air, what little remained, smelled of ozone and something organic, like flowers left too long in water. Everything was grown rather than built, organic technology that blurred the line between machine and living tissue. Bodies lay scattered throughout the corridors. Lyranthi, their slender forms crumpled in positions that suggested they'd died mid-stride, their unified purpose suddenly and catastrophically severed. Kaelin knelt beside one, studying the neural patterns visible beneath translucent skin. They were dark, burned out, like circuitry overloaded by too much current. "Poor bastards," Voss muttered. "Never stood a chance once their network went down." Kaelin stood, pushing down the guilt that threatened to surface. "They would have done worse to us. Assimilation, loss of self. At least this was quick." They moved deeper into the ship, following corridors that seemed to shift and change when they weren't looking directly at them. The Lyranthi had built grown, their vessels according to principles that human minds struggled to comprehend. Space folded in on itself. Distances became subjective. It was disorienting, nauseating, and utterly fascinating. "There," Kaelin said, pointing to a chamber ahead where the bioluminescence was brighter. "That's got to be something important." The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows that seemed to move with their own volition. At its center stood a structure that defied easy description, part organic growth, part crystalline lattice, part something else entirely. It pulsed with light that cycled through colors human eyes weren't designed to perceive, leaving afterimages that burned in Kaelin's vision. Navigation core, she breathed. Has to be. The Lyranthi could traverse the expanse without using conventional FTL. This is how they did it. Voss approached cautiously, his suit's sensors going haywire. Can we move it? Maybe, if we're very careful and very lucky. Kaelin circled the structure, her mind already cataloging the components she'd need to safely extract it. This was beyond salvage. This was a technological leap that could change everything for humanity's scattered outposts. A sound behind them, soft like breath through damaged lungs. They spun, weapons raised. A Lyranthi stood in the chamber's entrance, or rather, leaned against it, barely upright. Its translucent skin was mottled with dark patches where neural pathways had burned out. One eye was dark, the other still reflecting prismatic light, but dimly like a candle guttering in wind. You, the voice was singular now, no longer the harmonized chorus, just one individual, alone for perhaps the first time in its existence. What have you done to us? Kaelin kept her weapon steady, but something in the alien's voice, the raw confusion, the pain made her hesitate. We defended ourselves. You tried to assimilate us. We were, unified, purpose singular now. The Lyrantha's remaining eye fixed on her, and she saw something there she hadn't expected, fear. Now I am alone, I singular, isolated, it is. Agony. How do you bear it? How do you exist as fragments? We don't know any different, Kaelin said quietly. We've always been individuals. The alien made a sound that might have been laughter or sobbing. Crude mechanicals, fragmented minds. We thought you weak, pitiful, but you weaponized your isolation, turned our strength against us. It slid down the wall, its body failing. We underestimated you, fatal error. The veil is broken, scattered. We are dying, each of us alone, and we do not know how to be alone. Voss lowered his weapon slightly. There might be survivors, others like you could rebuild. No, the word was final. We were one consciousness distributed across many bodies. Now we are many consciousnesses, each trapped in isolation. We do not. The light in its remaining eye flickered. You have not killed us. You have done something worse. You have made us individuals, and we are not equipped for individuality. The alien's body went still. The last light faded from its eye. Kaelin stood in silence, staring at the corpse. Victory felt hollow suddenly, tainted by the understanding of what they'd actually done. The Lyranthi hadn't just died. They'd been forced to experience something their entire species had evolved beyond, something their minds couldn't process, the terrible isolation of individual consciousness. Come on, Voss said gruffly. Let's get that navigation core and get the hell out of here. They worked in silence, carefully extracting the crystalline structure and loading it onto a cargo sled. Around them, the ship continued its slow death, organic systems failing one by one. By the time they made it back to the shuttle, the flagship was dark, a tomb drifting in the void. Back at Outpost Meridian, the mood was cautiously celebratory. The Lyranthi fleet was dead or dying, their threat neutralized. Humanity's crude mechanicals had triumphed over psychic superiority through sheer adaptive chaos. But Kaelin couldn't shake the image of that last Lyranthi, dying alone and terrified of its own individuality. She stood in the observation blister again, watching the dead fleet drift in orbit. The ships were already beginning to decay, their organic components breaking down without the collective will to maintain them. Soon they'd be nothing but debris, another mystery of the whispering expanse. You did good, Doc, Voss said, joining her with 2 bulbs of the terrible coffee. Saved the outpost. Probably saved humanity from a pretty nasty fate. Did I? Kaelin accepted the coffee, not drinking. Or did I just commit genocide in a particularly creative way? They were going to assimilate us, erase everything that makes us human. I know that, but, she gestured at the dying fleet. They were so certain of their superiority, so convinced that their way unified consciousness, collective purpose was the pinnacle of evolution. And maybe it was. Maybe we are crude mechanicals, fragmented and weak, but we're also adaptable in ways they never imagined. We're used to being alone. We've built our entire civilization on the assumption that we're isolated individuals. That's our strength. And their weakness, Voss finished, poetic in a fucked-up way. Kaelin finally sipped the coffee. It tasted like victory and ashes. The navigation core. Once we figure out how it works, we can traverse the expanse like they did, find other outposts, maybe even make it back to the core systems. If we don't blow ourselves up trying to reverse engineer alien tech. There's that, she smiled faintly, but when has that ever stopped us? They stood together, watching the stars wheel past, two fragmented minds in a universe that didn't care about their survival. But they'd survived anyway, through ingenuity and desperation, and the kind of stubborn adaptability that only came from being alone. Humanity, fuck yeah. 3 days after the Lyranthi fleet's collapse, Outpost Meridian looked like a scrapyard's wet dream. Salvage teams worked around the clock, cutting into the dead ships and hauling out anything that looked remotely useful. Exotic matter conduits, organic computing substrates, gravitational lensing arrays, technology that humanity barely understood but would damn well learn to exploit. Kaelin supervised the operation from the command center, her eyes gritty from lack of sleep. The navigation core sat in a specially constructed containment chamber, still pulsing with faint light, still cycling through colors that made her head ache. She'd been studying it for 72 hours straight, trying to understand the principles that allowed the Lyranthi to fold space without conventional FTL drives. It was giving her a migraine and an education in physics that made her previous doctorate look like kindergarten. "Doc, you need to sleep," Chen said, not for the first time. "You're going to collapse." "I'll sleep when I understand how this thing works." Kaelin pulled up another holographic schematic, this one showing the quantum entanglement patterns within the core's crystalline lattice. The Lyranthi didn't just navigate space, they navigated consciousness. The core is linked to their psychic network, or was before we shattered it. It uses quantum-locked neural patterns to create shortcuts through spacetime, thought as navigation. It's brilliant and completely insane. Can we use it? Maybe, if we can interface it with our AI systems instead of organic minds. The drones proved that mechanical consciousness can interact with Lyranthi tech, even if it's chaotic. We just need to refine the process, make it controllable. Reeves entered the command center, his face pale. "Kaelin, we've got a problem." Of course they did, because 3 days of relative success was apparently the universe's limit. "What kind of problem?" "The kind with survivors." The Lyranthi survivor was found in one of the smaller vessels, a scout ship that had been on the fleet's periphery when the Cascade failure hit. It had managed to seal itself in a stasis pod before the psychic implosion reached it, cutting itself off from the network, and by extension, from the chaos that had destroyed its species. Now it was awake, and it was not happy. Kaelin approached the containment cell with Voss at her side, both armed, both wary. The Lyranthi inside was different from the others she'd seen, smaller, its translucent skin showing neural patterns that pulsed with erratic rhythms. It paced the cell with jerky movements, its multifaceted eyes tracking them with an intensity that was distinctly individual. "Murderers," it said, its voice singular and raw. "Butchers, you destroyed the veil, scattered consciousness, made us alone." "We defended ourselves," Kaelin said evenly. "You tried to assimilate us. We offered unity, purpose. You were fragmented, weak, suffering in isolation. We would have elevated you, made you part of something greater. Instead, you weaponized your isolation, turned it against us. You are monsters." Voss's hand moved to his sidearm. "Watch your tone, alien. You're alive because we allow it. The Lyranthi laughed a harsh, broken sound. Alive? This is not life. This is torture. I am one, singular, isolated. Every thought echoes in emptiness. Every decision is mine alone. The weight of individuality is crushing. You live like this always. How? How do you bear the loneliness? Kaelin felt something twist in her chest. We don't know any different. We're born alone. We die alone. Everything in between is just coping. Coping? The alien stopped pacing, its eyes fixed on her. You cope with fragmentation, with the absence of unity. You have built your entire civilization on loneliness and called it strength. It is strength, Kaelin said quietly. Because we're adaptable, we don't need consensus. We don't need unified purpose. Every human is a separate mind, capable of independent thought, independent action. That's why we survived you. That's why we won. The Lyranthi was silent for a long moment. Then, won? Yes, you won, and we lost everything. The veil is gone. My people are dead or dying, each one trapped in the prison of individual consciousness. You have committed genocide, Dr. Rourke, not with weapons, with isolation. I did what I had to do to protect my people. As did we. The alien's voice softened, became almost plaintive. We saw your fragmentation as weakness, as suffering that needed correction. We were wrong, but does that justify what you did? Does survival excuse extinction? Kaelin had no answer. She'd been asking herself the same question for 3 days. Voss broke the silence. What do you want? Why are you still alive when the rest of your fleet is dead? I sealed myself in stasis before the Cascade reached me. Cowardice, perhaps, or survival instinct, a concept I never understood until I became individual. Now I am the last, the final fragment of the veil, and I do not know what to do with this singularity. You could help us, Kaelin said suddenly. The navigation core, we're trying to understand it, to use it. You could teach us. The Lyranthi's eyes flashed. Help you after what you did. You said it yourself, you're the last. Your species is gone, but their knowledge doesn't have to be. Help us understand the core, and the Lyranthi Veil's legacy lives on. Isn't that better than dying alone in a cell? The alien was quiet for a long time. Its neural patterns pulsed with colors that Kaelin was beginning to recognize as emotional states: confusion, anger, grief, and something that might have been hope. You offer me purpose, it said finally. Individual purpose, not collective. It is strange, uncomfortable, but perhaps it is better than emptiness. Voss looked at Kaelin like she'd lost her mind. You want to work with this thing, after it called us murderers? It's not wrong, Kaelin said quietly. We did kill its entire species. The least we can do is make sure their knowledge survives, and we need its help if we're going to make the navigation core work. The commander's jaw worked his synthetic gum with aggressive precision. Then he sighed. Your call, Doc, but if it tries anything, I'm spacing it. Clear. Clear. Kaelin turned back to the Lyranthi. Do we have a deal? The alien approached the transparent barrier, its eyes meeting hers. A deal? How very individual. Yes, I will help you understand the core. In exchange, you will preserve the Veil's knowledge, and perhaps you will help me understand how to be alone. That, Kaelin said with a faint smile, I can definitely help with. Working with the Lyranthi, it had chosen the name Veil. A fragment of its former collective identity was like trying to communicate with someone who spoke a language where every word had 17 meanings and 3 of them were colors. But slowly, painfully, they made progress. Veil explained that the navigation core didn't just fold space, it folded consciousness. The Lyranthi had discovered that thought and spacetime were fundamentally linked, that a sufficiently unified consciousness could perceive and manipulate the quantum foam underlying reality. Their ships didn't travel through space so much as think themselves to new locations, using the collective will of thousands of linked minds to reshape the universe's topology. But we don't have a collective consciousness, Kaelin said, studying the holographic models Veil had helped her construct. We're individuals, fragmented. Yes, Veil agreed, its voice still carrying that note of discomfort with singularity. Which is why you cannot use the core as we did. But your AI swarms. They are not truly individual, are they? They are distributed intelligence, networked but not unified. Perhaps they could interface with the core, provide the collective processing power needed to navigate. Kaelin's mind raced. A hybrid system, mechanical consciousness interfacing with organic technology. The AIs provide the processing power, but they remain independent, adaptive. No single point of failure. Crude, Veil said, but there was something in its tone that might have been respect. But potentially functional. Your species has a talent for making crude solutions work. We call it jury-rigging, Kaelin said with a grin, and we're damn good at it. They worked through the night, Kaelin and Veil, and a team of engineers who looked at the alien with varying degrees of suspicion and fascination. The navigation core was carefully interfaced with a network of AI nodes, not the combat swarm that had destroyed the Lyranthi fleet, but a new generation designed specifically for navigation and spatial manipulation. The first test was dramatic. The core pulsed with light, the AI network engaged, and for one terrifying moment, the entire outpost seemed to shift sideways through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Alarms shrieked. People screamed. Kaelin's stomach tried to exit through her spine. Then reality snapped back, and they were still on HR 7743, still intact, still alive. Well, Voss said shakily, that was fucking horrifying. But it worked, Kaelin said, checking the readings. For about 3 seconds we folded space. We moved the outpost 0.001 light-years. It's a start. Veil's neural patterns flickered with what might have been amusement. Crude, but functional. With refinement you could traverse the expanse as we did. Perhaps even surpass us, given your talent for chaotic adaptation. High praise from someone who called us fragmented weaklings, Kaelin said dryly. I was wrong, we were wrong. Your fragmentation is not weakness. It is resilience. Each individual a backup system capable of independent function. When the veil fell, we all fell. But if one human falls, others continue. It is inefficient, redundant, and remarkably effective. Kaelin looked at the alien, this last survivor of a species that had considered itself superior, now forced to confront the value of the very traits it had despised. There was a lesson there, she thought, about arrogance, about adaptation, about the unexpected strengths that came from being alone. Come on, she said. Let's run another test, and this time let's try not to fold the outpost into the fourth dimension. No promises, Veil said, and Kaelin could have sworn the alien was smiling. 6 weeks after the Lyranthi Veil's destruction, Outpost Meridian made its first successful jump. The navigation core, now fully integrated with a distributed AI network, pulsed with controlled power. The outpost's superstructure groaned as spacetime folded around it, reality bending in ways that made human senses scream. Then, with a sensation like falling upward, they were elsewhere. The asteroid HR 7743 now orbited a different star, 3 light-years from its original position. The jump had taken 17 seconds. In the command center, cheers erupted. Voss allowed himself a rare smile. Chen was openly weeping with joy. Reeves was hugging anyone within reach. Kaelin stood at the observation blister, watching the new star, a red dwarf, smaller and cooler than their previous sun, but beautiful in its own way. Beside her, Veil observed with its multifaceted eyes, neural patterns pulsing with colors that Kaelin had learned to read as contemplation. You have done it, the alien said quietly. Taken our technology and made it yours. The Veil's legacy continues, even if the Veil itself is gone. Does that bother you? Kaelin asked. That we're using your people's knowledge. Once it would have. We would have seen it as theft, as crude mechanicals defiling something sacred, but I have learned much in these weeks about individuality, about adaptation, about the value of perspectives that are not unified. Veil turned to face her. The Veil believed that unity was the highest form of existence. That fragmentation was a flaw to be corrected. We were wrong. There is strength in diversity, in independent thought, in the chaos of individual minds pursuing separate goals. You sound almost human, Kaelin said with a faint smile. A terrifying prospect, but Veil's tone was light, almost playful. I have been alone for 6 weeks now, singular, isolated, and I have not died, I have not gone mad, I have adapted, learned to bear the weight of individual consciousness. It is still uncomfortable, still strange, but perhaps it is not torture, perhaps it is simply different. Kaelin felt a surge of something that might have been pride. You're doing well, better than you think. I have a good teacher. Veil paused. What will you do now? You have the navigation core. You can traverse the expanse, find other human outposts, perhaps even return to your core systems. That's the plan. Reconnect with the rest of humanity, share what we've learned, maybe even warn them about the dangers of underestimating crude mechanicals. She glanced at the alien. What about you? You're welcome to stay, or we could drop you somewhere if you want to find other survivors. There are no other survivors. I am the last of the Veil. Veil's neural patterns dimmed. But perhaps that is not an ending. Perhaps it is a beginning. I could stay, help you refine the navigation system, learn more about this strange existence you call individuality, if you would have me. We'd be honored, Kaelin said sincerely. You've earned your place here. They stood together in silence, watching the red dwarf's light paint the observation blister in shades of crimson. Two beings from species that had nearly destroyed each other, now working toward a common goal. It was messy, imperfect, beautifully human. The next jump took them to a system where long-range sensors detected another human outpost, this one larger, more established, with actual defenses and a functioning economy. Outpost Meridian's arrival caused quite a stir. Ships that could fold space were the stuff of legend, technology that humanity had been chasing for centuries. Kaelin found herself in high demand, explaining the navigation core's principles to scientists who looked at her like she'd brought fire from the gods. Veil, too, became something of a celebrity, the last Lyranthi, working alongside humans, proof that even the most fundamental differences could be bridged. But Kaelin's favorite moment came 3 months after their first jump, when a young engineer approached her with a prototype. It was a smaller navigation core, grown from samples of the original, designed to be installed in individual ships rather than entire outposts. If this works, the engineer said excitedly, we could have a fleet of FTL-capable vessels within a year. We could reconnect all the scattered outposts, maybe even push beyond the expanse, explore regions we've never reached. Kaelin studied the prototype, her mind already racing with possibilities. We'd need to train AI operators, develop safety protocols, make sure we don't accidentally fold someone into a black hole. Details, the engineer said with a grin. The point is, we can do this, because of you, because you figured out how to turn the Lyranthi's own technology against them, then make it work for us. I had help, Kaelin said, glancing at Veil, who was consulting with a group of physicists nearby. A lot of help. The engineer followed her gaze. Still can't believe we're working with one of them, after what they tried to do. They underestimated us, Kaelin said quietly. Thought we were weak because we're fragmented. Didn't realize that our isolation is what makes us strong. We're adaptable, resilient. Every human is a separate mind capable of independent thought and action. That's not a weakness. That's our greatest strength. Humanity, fuck yeah, the engineer said with a laugh. Kaelin smiled. Exactly. A year after the Lyranthi Veil's destruction, Outpost Meridian had become a hub of activity. Ships came and went. using the navigation cores that were now being mass-produced. The whispering expanse, once a barrier that isolated human settlements, had become a highway. Kaelin stood in her workshop, much larger now, with proper equipment and a team of assistants, working on the latest refinement to the navigation system. Veil was there too, its neural patterns pulsing with colors that Kaelin had learned to recognize as contentment. "You have changed the course of your species," the alien said. "The Veil sought to assimilate you to correct what we saw as fragmentation. Instead, you took our technology and used it to enhance your individuality, to connect your scattered outposts while preserving their independence. It is poetic." "It's survival," Kaelin corrected. "We do what we have to do, adapt or die." "And you are very good at adapting." Veil paused. "I have been thinking about the Veil, about what we were and what we could have been. We believed that unity was the pinnacle of evolution, that collective consciousness was superior to individual minds, but perhaps we were stagnant, unchanging. Our unity made us powerful, but it also made us inflexible. We could not adapt because we could not disagree. Every thought was consensus, every decision unanimous. There was no room for the chaos that drives innovation." "You're saying we won because we're messy." "I am saying you won because you are diverse, because each human mind is different, pursuing different goals, thinking different thoughts. That diversity creates friction, yes, conflict, inefficiency, but it also creates innovation, adaptation, the ability to respond to threats in ways that a unified consciousness never could." Kaelin set down her tools, giving Veil her full attention. "That's actually pretty profound. I have had much time to think, alone. It is still uncomfortable, this individuality, but I am beginning to understand its value, and I am grateful that you gave me the chance to learn." "You earned it," Kaelin said, "by helping us, by adapting, by proving that even the most fundamental differences can be overcome." Veil's neural patterns flared with colors that Kaelin had learned to recognize as emotion, gratitude, respect, and something that might have been friendship. "The Veil is gone," the alien said quietly. "But perhaps its legacy is not in the technology you have claimed, but in the lesson we learned too late. That strength comes not from unity, but from diversity. Not from consensus, but from the chaos of individual minds working toward common goals. The Veil believed we were superior. We were wrong, and that wrongness cost us everything. But it taught us something valuable," Kaelin said, "about underestimating others, about the dangers of arrogance, about the unexpected strengths that come from being different." "Yes," Veil turned to face her fully, "and perhaps that is the true legacy of the Veil, not the technology, not the knowledge, but the understanding that diversity is strength, that fragmentation is resilience, that the crude mechanicals we dismissed were, in fact, the most adaptable species we had ever encountered." Kaelin smiled. "Humanity, fuck yeah." "Indeed," Veil said, and this time there was no doubt the alien was smiling too. 5 years after the Lyranthi Veil's destruction, Dr. Kaelin Rourke stood on the bridge of the Adaptive, humanity's first purpose-built exploration vessel, equipped with Lyranthi-derived navigation technology. Around her, a crew of 50 worked with practiced efficiency, preparing for a jump that would take them beyond the whispering expanse, into regions of space that no human had ever explored. Veil stood beside her, now wearing a modified pressure suit that accommodated its unique physiology. The alien had become humanity's ambassador to the unknown, a living bridge between species, a reminder that even the most fundamental differences could be overcome. "Ready?" Kaelin asked. "Ready," Veil confirmed. "Though I confess I am nervous, an individual emotion, still strange after all this time." "You'll get used to it," Kaelin said with a grin. "Or you won't. Either way, you'll adapt. That's what we do." She turned to the navigation officer. "Engage the core. Let's see what's out there." The navigation core pulsed with light, the AI network engaged, and spacetime folded around the Adaptive. For a moment, reality bent in ways that human senses still struggled to process. Then they were elsewhere, emerging into a system that no human had ever seen. 3 planets orbited a yellow sun. Long-range sensors detected artificial structures on the second planet, cities, perhaps, or something analogous. Signs of intelligent life. "Well," Kaelin said quietly, "looks like we're not alone out here." "No," Veil agreed. "But perhaps that is good. Diversity is strength after all, and the universe is very large. There is room for many different kinds of minds." Kaelin thought about the Lyranthi Veil, about their arrogance and their fall, about the lesson they'd learned too late, that underestimating others, dismissing them as crude or weak, was a fatal mistake. Humanity had been underestimated, and humanity had survived. Now they were the ones exploring, the ones reaching out, the ones carrying the Lyranthi's legacy forward, not through conquest or assimilation, but through adaptation and cooperation. It was messy, imperfect, beautifully human. "All right," Kaelin said, her voice carrying across the bridge. "Let's make contact, and let's try not to start a war this time." The crew laughed, tension breaking. The adaptive moved forward, toward the unknown, carrying humanity's flag and the last Lyranthi's hope into the vast darkness of space. Behind them, the whispering expanse stretched out like a highway of stars, no longer a barrier but a path. And on countless outposts throughout that expanse, humans worked and lived and adapted, each one a separate mind, each one a fragment of a species that had learned to turn its greatest weakness into its greatest strength. Crude mechanicals, fragmented minds, isolated individuals. Humanity. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more journeys. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for the next adventure.